Okay, all right, let's get started with episode 8, and it is entitled Am I Okay? Um, Again, thank you for joining me for this journey that I've been on through these 8 episodes, of course, including today. And I think that we're going to do another 8 where I really, if I'm not mistaken, I said that before, where I really focus on, in this next 8, what my life is like, dealing with my husband and his illness. But today, it's all about me. And like I said, this particular episode is entitled Am I Okay? So, in the previous episodes, I've explained that I've been the caregiver for um, my husband, my ex husband, my children, my grandparents, my mom, and my dad, and even my dog. So today we're going to talk about me and how I deal with that just a little bit. Because my dealing with that is an ongoing thing. My dealing with that is ever changing and evolving, as I begin to utilize coping mechanisms that I've learned in the past, but also that are newly learned. And if you're watching this, my head is cut off, and I do apologize, but that is just the way the camera is positioned right now. Um, so, me. Um, if you've never looked up or seen any of the things that I have done in the past, or been privy to any of the things that I've done before, then you don't know that I am a spiritual life coach. I'm a writing coach. I am a creative person. I like to sew. I like to create things. I like to read. I've been an interior designer in a previous life. Um, I am a creative person, but I'm also that person that enjoys my me time. I enjoy having time to myself. And what I have found is that I actually enjoy having that time to myself because I'm always surrounded by people who need something from me. So, in the moments where I'm having that time to myself, um, no one needs anything from me. No one is requiring that I be attentive to them and their needs. No one is asking me to do one thing or another. It is all about me and what I need. So, one of the things that I have done is journal. And I've done that since I was a child. I've written in diaries. I've written books. I've journaled my life. And I wish that I had all of those diaries from, my younger days, but I don't. I don't have not one of them. And I think that's probably why I make up for it now with all of the journals that I have now, because I don't have any of those. Most of them are empty, but some of them have my life in it from the early 2000s, because that is when my first marriage had deteriorated, and I was getting back to one being myself, not someone's spouse. But I was also expressing myself, and I had to get all of those feelings out, all of those emotions out. And I was able to do that with writing, whether it was poetry or just sharing what I dreamt about the night before, or if it was truly just my feelings in general. I even created a course around writing in order to relieve the stress in your life. Um, so that's one way that I'm able to alleviate the stress that I have as a caregiver. Another way that I do that is I help other people with getting their lives together and processing the pain and healing from the pain that they've experienced. I have done everything that I can to grow all right, sorry about that. I had to pause for a sec. The husband is quite nosy. He likes to think that he isn't, but he is. And when I record, I like to record in private as I possibly can, because like my journals, like my diaries, this is personal to me until I share it with someone else, if I share it with someone else. But of course, this will be shared because it's a podcast. But yeah, so that's how I grow. That's how I grow beyond the dysfunction that was in my life. That is how I've grown beyond the pain that I have endured. I do that by helping others do the very same thing. But let's talk about how being a caregiver has impacted me in my health. So, and this is why I ask the question of, am I okay? That's why this is entitled, Am I Okay? Because throughout my life as a caregiver, I've had to ask myself that question. People have asked me that question of, am I okay? Is everything all right? And initially, you give your cursory, yeah, I'm fine. Because you don't want people to know what you're really experiencing, although you are screaming on the inside for somebody to help you, for somebody to see what you're, enduring, for someone to say, hey, it's okay for you not to be okay. For years, that was my cursory answer. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm good. And then it became, I'll be all right. I'll get there. No, I'm not okay, but I'll get there. And now I'm at the point in my life where I will absolutely, no, I'm not okay. And I've got to find ways to be okay. I've got to figure out how to be okay. And it's warm in here, so I'm going to turn my fan on. Still talk, but turn my fan on. So how this has impacted me in a physical sense, in my health, in my body. So with all three of my pregnancies, as I said, I was put on bed rest on different occasions. Put on bed rest because my body was experiencing stress from being pregnant, from trying to carry the life that was within me, but also trying to deal with the chaos that was around me. So my body, to a degree, would shut down at a certain point in each pregnancy, and I would be forced to do nothing in order to protect the pregnancy. And that's kind of hard to do once you have a child already, or a spouse or significant other in your life actively. That's difficult to do, but I somehow made it happen. Now with the first pregnancy, I was able to do it to a degree because I didn't have any children. I didn't have my significant other. It was not the best situation, and I knew how, and because we didn't live together, I knew how to say, I don't want to be bothered today. And even when he would show up anyway, I would just stay away from him, or I would just sit and not interact with him because I just didn't feel like it. And he, on the other hand, wanted to be there all the time. And that was a problem for me because when I want my space, I want my space. And he was not that person that believed in me in that moment having that space because I was carrying his kid. The second time I was working full time, like I had a kid already, and I was dealing with my boyfriend, soon to be fiance, and then husband being away for a good portion of that pregnancy because he was still away in school, and came back just before our child was born. And that was stressful because we were dealing with his family not being okay with the whole situation. We were dealing with him not being okay with the situation. So that was stressful. And something I forgot to mention, with the first pregnancy, I worked fast food. I worked for a major fast food burger joint in Chicago that happened to be placed in downtown Chicago, in the same building with a major transportation hub, surrounded by high-rise buildings filled with offices that were filled with people. So during our lunchtime, lunch was crazy. Lunch was crazy. So we are in this restaurant, and I can say what it is because it doesn't. The restaurant chain itself does exist, but that particular location no longer exists. So during this time, I worked for Burger King inside the Greyhound bus terminal in the middle of downtown Chicago, surrounded by the court buildings, the city hall, the state building, and all of the other high rises. And during lunch, we would have people from the counter out through into the lobby area of the Greyhound bus station. That's how crazy packed it would get in there. So I worked there. That was a stress during a first pregnancy. Well, I've never been pregnant before, of course. I didn't know what it was like to be the mother of a child, outside of having care for my brother. I didn't know if I wanted to deal with my child's father. Quite honestly, I didn't want to, but I did for the sake of my child. I had to deal with my mom, who was having her issues still with addiction. I had to deal with my grandparents and their judgmental ways, their snide comments. And then I had to deal with the parents of my son's father, who were suspicious of me because he had not told them about me, and I had waited until I was 6 months pregnant before I told him about the pregnancy. So all of those stresses caused me to be put on bed rest. With the second one, like I said, it was, the stresses of having a child already, the significant other at the time being away at school, and him still trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life, and he's afraid of what to do as far as being a parent is concerned, what all of his family was going to think, because he's having a kid out of wedlock, and he's from the church and knows better. So am I. I'm from the church and I know better, but I mean, we still did it. We are humans. We did what humans do. We made our own decisions. We were given the gift of free will. We decided to do what we wanted to do. Doing that created a life, and here we are trying to figure out how to deal with it. So that stress caused me to be placed on bed rest. The third one, I was so stressed because this is when he was in his addiction pretty good. And I'm working full time trying to hold on to this job. He's not working, so he's home with the children and calling and stressing me out, and pranks and things of that nature. And it was difficult for me to relax. And here I am carrying this third child that I had not intended to even become pregnant with, because we were already struggling financially. We were already struggling in our marriage. And here I am. And I believe my child knows this. But the reason that I was pregnant was because I could not afford my birth control. and I got pregnant. So not having the money to pay for those birth control pills is created a whole life that ended up costing me financially more. And some people were like, especially that I worked with, they were like, are you serious? You could have borrowed that money from one of us. And now you've got a whole life that you've got to take care of that you had no plans on actually having. But that stress of dealing with him and, you know, financially struggling, and he's not working, and he's in the height of his addiction. And when I say the height of his addiction, I mean the height of his addiction. Not just when we got married was he late, but he was an addict for quite some time, because we got married in 96. Our third child was born in 98. So he was in his addiction for a couple of years, a few years, before he finally came out of it, and decided to get his life together. But even in him deciding to get his life together, he still didn't get it together for quite some time. But anyway, so the stress of that, the stress of not being able to gain weight, actually losing weight, because everything I ate I threw up. And it was so funny to the people that I worked with, because if they saw me walking down the hallway, if anyone saw me walking down the hallway, you would not have known that I was pregnant, because it did not show up anywhere but in my stomach. But the moment I turn around, you see this massive round belly in front of me, I want to say basketball, but it was bigger than a basketball. At least that's how it felt. But yeah, so you would see me from the back and you couldn't tell that I was pregnant. I had literally lost a considerable amount of weight pregnant with this third child. And the only way that you could tell that I was pregnant was when you looked at me face on, or I turned to the side. You could not tell that I was carrying a kid from the back. So anyway, I ended up on bed rest with him. And then during that marriage, I went from gaining, and this of course is after I've had the child, gaining a considerable amount of weight to, being over 200 pounds. My face looked like someone had just plopped a ball on my neck. My face was so full and round. I couldn't fit any of my clothing. I was tired of my clothes being tight. I couldn't afford to really buy anything, even though I was slowly climbing up the ladder at work, going from clerk to admin. But because we were still struggling and he was still having a difficult time holding on to a job, there wasn't really much that I could do. And we had moved out of the apartment that I had gotten for myself and back into the basement unit of the 2-flat that my grandparents owned. And just the stress of being in that relationship, the stress of him cheating, the stress of him using, the stress of having 3 children in this teeny tiny apartment, the stress of dealing with my judgmental grandparents and my mom who was still in her addiction. All of that caused me to gain weight. And then my stomach began to misbehave, and I was having horrible reactions, and relieving myself, not relieving myself in opportune times, but I could not hold anything. So I would eat something and it would go right through me. And then I began losing my hair, and I would hide the losing of the hair. I would hide it. I had cut my hair off at one point, down to a little afro that was long enough to cover the spots because they weren't very big, but still short enough to deal with, because I had to cut off all the damaged hair and start all over again. And then when I finally made the decision to leave him alone, I still dealt with stresses of, yep, he cheated. Yep, now I got to raise these 3 kids on my own. Yep, now even in us trying to reconcile and get our lives back together, I find out that he's having another kid with someone else. So there is no reconciling and getting back together. And now I'm in a depression because being a caregiver put me into a depression. So now I've gained weight, I've lost weight, I've gained weight, I've lost hair, I'm in a depression, and I'm trying to figure my life out. And I have this come to Jesus moment where I'm having this conversation with God, and this is when he tells me I need to write my book, and I say, no, not gonna happen. But I finally come out of that depression and start seeing a therapist who then prescribes medication, which I hate and stop taking. I'm going into different relationships. One of these relationships, the guy wanted to marry me, and I was like, not gonna happen. Been there, done that. To just deciding to live my life the way that I wanted to, doing what I wanted to do, because I'd always been someone's girlfriend, mother, fiance, wife. I'd done all of this, and I just wanted to live my life the way I wanted to. So I did that. But then I realized that I couldn't do that anymore. I had to get my life together. I still dated who I wanted to date, but I realized it wasn't fulfilling me anymore. I had done the things, I'd been to the places, I had met the people, and now what? So coming into discovering myself, my hair began to fall out even more, because I'm still dealing with the stresses of raising 3 children on my own. I'm still dealing with the stresses of dealing with a mother who is an addict and an alcoholic. I'm still dealing with the stresses of having a full-time job outside of the home. And at one point I didn't have a job for a year. I laid into bed, depressed, no work. Finally decided to get up and get myself together. Dealing with the stresses of my grandparents and their neediness, and them being financially unstable because they had gambling issues. Still dealing with the stresses of all of that, and trying to enjoy my life as a single woman and embrace who I am and explore things and do things. And my hair is still falling out. And even to this day, you can see, if you're watching the video, I'll see if I can show you, but it might be kind of tough because of the lighting. But I began losing hair in the top of my head, and then on either side. And I got tired of trying to hide it. So I was doing my own hair. I had taught myself how to braid my hair years before, and I finally perfected it. So I was braiding my hair. I'd gone all natural, no perm, no product, nothing to straighten it, unless I decided to wash it and blow dry it, which was few and far between because I didn't want the extra heat on my hair. So I was, doing everything I can to hide it, the twist outs, the twisting my hair and then taking it down and making my hair look fuller, because at this point my hair had grown back. Braiding my hair, putting it up in ponytails so no one could see it, or braiding it to a point where I could cover those spots. And then I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm tired of braiding it. I'm tired of twisting it. I'm tired of all of that. The products, the hours on end that I was losing in life because I was sitting and trying to maintain this head of hair that was falling out more and more by the day. So I cut it all off. I cut it all off right before my 40th birthday, because I had finally gotten to a point where I was physically feeling good. I had finally gotten to a point where I was emotionally feeling great, mentally feeling good. The depression was no longer there. I had developed this great relationship with God again. I had lost a good amount of weight the healthy way. And there was a difference between losing it the healthy way and the unhealthy way, because I had done that too. After separating from my first husband, I lost a good amount of weight in a very short period of time. We separated in October. I was weighing over 200 pounds by the time Christmas came. I had lost 50 pounds. So in the matter of 3 months, I had lost 50 pounds. That's too much weight to lose in such a short time. I was looking emaciated, to the point where people thought that I had cancer. Seriously, I lost so much weight that people thought that I had cancer. I had dark circles under my eyes. I looked tired and ragged all the time. And even when I, of course, was trying to look good, and pull myself together, I looked ragged and stressed and sick all the time. So I put a little weight back on, got healthy again, and decided that I was going to lose weight. When it was time for me to lose weight again, that I was going to do it the right way. So I worked out, and working out for me is just having a good long walk. Doing a little bit of aerobics. When I say aerobics, I mean Pilates. I mean doing some stretching, yoga. A little bit of aerobics where the heart rate gets going, but not a whole heck of a lot. So I was doing these things to get myself back on track and to get myself healthy. And I was at my healthiest moment on all levels, but my hair was still looking crazy. And I was tired of it. So I cut it all off. Like I said, right before my 40th birthday. And I had started dating this guy who was a roofer and a motorcycle driver, and he had this huge big pickup truck, and he was 6'4" and dark and really very handsome and really very crazy. And I knew that he was nuts. And when I say nuts, I mean that his concept of what a relationship should look like was completely different from any concept of a relationship that I had ever experienced in my life. And this is who he was, and was proud of it. He believed in having multiple women. He believed in having multiple sex partners at the same time. He believed that it had to be done a certain way and only that way. And he had quite a few of us wrapped around his finger, because I mean, who would not want tall, dark, and handsome with his own business? He was well-to-do. I mean, well-to-do. Lucrative roofing business. Owned a 2-flat with a double lot in the suburbs of Chicago. And it was crazy as a Betsy bug. Just flipping nuts. And it got to a point where I was like, you know what? I don't even want to deal with this person anymore. Why am I subjecting myself essentially to abuse when I can just walk away? And I eventually did. But before I did, I turned 40 years old. I cut all my hair off. And he thought it was so sexy. He didn't think that he would, because when he met me, I was just a little bit heavier, but not like really heavy. He couldn't tell how big I really was or wasn't, because I wore baggy clothing. And I decided right before my 40th, hey, I'm about to throw this whole thing for a loop. And I gave myself a party. So now I've got this bald head. I'm sexy as goodness, and I'm, healthy thin. And I was wearing colored contacts at the time. Loved my colored contacts, but they were prescription. And I looked good. If I think about it, maybe I'll insert in the video portion of this podcast a picture from my birthday. I looked good, and did not bring him to the party. Did not bring that man that I was dating to the party. And people were shocked, because they were like, we know that you're a loner, but we also know that you date. And we thought that you were in a relationship with someone. I was. He was not coming to my party. As a matter of fact, I didn't really tell him about the party until like the week of. I never invited him to the party. And once the party was done, I told him all about it. Told him all about it. I started doing things that I wanted to do. I got into acting because I wanted to explore my creative side in that way. Did a couple of plays, and then I met my current husband, and was in a good place in my life, finally getting myself together and being comfortable with me. And then I met my husband, and as I said into talking about him, the podcast about him, things were rocky. Things were good to start. Then I got crazy, and then I made it clear that I wasn't the person that he thought that I was going to be. And things got a little bit better, and then they got rocky again, and we went to counseling, and they got better for a little bit, and then they got rocky again, and then they were dealing with his health all at the same time, because now he's a diabetic, and I'm caring for him and making sure that he's taking his meds, or attempting to make sure he takes his meds. And he, of course, is choosing not to, and it just got really crazy. And then I had to take care of, my grandparents and still my mom. And then we lost a good friend in September of 2015. And then we lost my grandfather in October of 2015. And we're trying to figure out how to care for my grandmother, who is suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia. And the dementia came in high key after my grandfather passed away, and we had to move her. The Alzheimer's was just forgetting the stuff. The dementia was a totally different thing. When I tell you that stuff got bad, it got bad. If you've ever had to deal with an Alzheimer's patient, if you've ever had to deal with a loved one with Alzheimer's, then you understand what I mean. When I say Alzheimer's in itself is one thing, but when you throw in that dementia, it's a whole different thing. And I used to think that Alzheimer's and dementia were basically the same. Not so. Not so. So we're dealing with how to care for her, and my mom and my sons are taking turns going back and forth and caring for her, while I still try to work and deal with all of that. And then suddenly my mom passed in December of 2015, and we're like, oh crap, now what? So we lost a good friend, we lost my grandfather, and then we lose my mom, all while we're trying to deal with my grandmother, who has Alzheimer's and now dementia. And she's roaming the halls of her apartment complex. They were living in a senior apartment building, and she's now roaming the halls, knocking on doors, trying to find my grandfather, because of course she's forgotten that he's passed on. And of course she's thinking that she's somewhere where he might be visiting a neighbor, which he never did. He never visited anyone. But then I also think it took her back to when they lived in a high-rise building before, and they had made a couple of friends in the high-rise that they were living in. But he never visited people in the building. But for whatever reason, she believed that he had, so she's knocking on doors looking for him. And I'm trying to deal with losing him, deal with losing my mom, trying to care for her. My husband's working in a suburban area an hour away. We've got one vehicle, and I'm trying to be her caretaker. That's my job at this point. I'm trying to be her caretaker. We're living in a house where the landlord is being an absolute evil person. I won't call her what she called me. She's being an absolute evil person. We're trying to find somewhere else to live because my grandmother can't live with us in that house because it's too dangerous as far as the stairs are concerned. All of those stresses, and I'm dealing with all of that stress while also dealing with a husband who thinks that I should do everything. Everything. Cook, clean. doctor's appointments, making sure that everything else is taken care of, pay the bills, and keep them paid on time. Everything. This is what I have to deal with. And I feel myself going back into a depression, but I can't, because I've got to take care of all of this stuff and all of these people. And we finally find a place to go in an area of town that I had never lived in before in my life, and it was so unfamiliar to me, but we figured it out, and we moved into this place. We moved my grandmother in eventually, and her dementia kicks in high key. So she is trying to get out of the apartment. She's trying to figure out how she can get out, and she's having conversations with her sisters on the phone. And at this point, one of the sisters was deceased. The sister that she's having the conversation with is deceased, but she's having this conversation with her, and I'm trying to take care of her, and I'm getting her to her doctor's appointments, and dealing with her using the bathroom and everything but the toilet, having to deal with her trying to cook and turning the oven on, and the gas is on but there's no flame, so now the home is filled with, gas fumes, and still trying to pay bills and get the rent paid on time, because we're paying a tremendous amount of rent for an apartment that, even though it looked good, it was not worth what we were paying. But it kept us from being homeless, and my husband's the only one that has a full-time job, and I'm dealing with all of this stuff, and I'm not sleeping because my grandmother doesn't sleep, and when she did sleep, it was usually during the daytime where I had stuff to do, and I am trying my best to keep it together, and then I get sick. So my grandmother gets sick, she goes into the hospital, comes out of the hospital, I take her to her doctor's appointment. I'm sick. And her doctor says to me, it's time for you to put her in a facility that can better care for her, because you can't. It's too much for you. This has gone beyond what you say that you can do. And as much as you would love to keep her at home with you, if you don't put her in a facility, I am afraid it's going to kill you. You're already sick. It's going to kill you. And we're at a point where I have tried to get her son, my uncle, to take care of her, and he won't take care of her. She can't live with him, according to he and his girlfriend. She can't live with them. Can't. So I go ahead and put her in a facility. Broke my heart, but I did it. And my husband is getting sicker and sicker, because I see him losing the weight. I see what's going on with him. And now that she's in the facility and I can concentrate on what's going on with him, and we're trying to get him to the doctor and find out what's going on. We moved here to Texas, and I'm dealing with the stress of now we have a diagnosis finally, and I'm working a full-time job. We're in a neighborhood, in a city estate that we have family here, but we don't have anyone here. Like when we first moved here, we lived with family for 3 months and we got our own place. We had to get our own place. We already had the time frame, but it was paramount that we stick to that time frame, because I was going crazy living in that person's house and trying to deal with my husband and his illness. Him and heat stroke, because their air conditioning didn't work on the second level of the home. It was just so much. It was too much. And then in 2018, I became deathly ill. So we moved here in 2017 in April. We finally get his diagnosis in May. He's going downhill, beginning to weigh less than 100 pounds. I'm trying to work full time, get him to his doctor's appointments, stress over all of the stuff that I'm stressing over. I lost my paternal grandmother during that time. And then in 2018, I get deathly ill. I thought I had the flu, because the flu was going around. This is the flu that was killing everybody. I thought I had the flu. and I'm rushed to the hospital in tremendous amounts of pain, throwing up. And we get there. They run my blood work. And the doctor comes running in, yelling at me, "Why didn't you come in here sooner? What took you so long to get in here?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I don't understand. You're yelling at me, but you haven't told me what's going on." Turns out I'm septic. I have septicemia. My body is full of infection. Infection had attacked my fallopian tubes. I'm full of infection. Bloodstream, full of infection. Septicemia can kill. Your body being full of infection can kill. So this is why the doctor was pissed off at me. This is why she was upset with me. And she, in her mind, if I had come in earlier and dealt with it, I would be okay. I would be all right. They would have treated this earlier. I didn't know. I thought I had the flu. I was literally taking flu medication because, again, this is during the time where the flu was killing people. There were several people in our offices at the time that had the flu. So I thought it had just gotten to me because I catch the flu every year. I thought it had gotten to me. So I'm treating it like it's the flu. And in actuality, I'm full of infection. Like I said, it had attacked my fallopian tubes and I had to have emergency surgery. They put me on IV antibiotics. I was away from the job for 6 weeks. They took the tubes out of me because I'm getting IV antibiotics. They took the tubes out of me. The infection comes right back. Just like that, comes right back. That is when I had the emergency surgery because they thought the IV antibiotics would do it, would get rid of it. It would be. Now, we had talked about the possibility of me having surgery, but later on the IV antibiotics for the 6 weeks, got off on a Friday, went back to work on that Tuesday, was back in the hospital Tuesday night to Wednesday, back on IV antibiotics in the hospital. They had me on there for another 6 weeks. Yeah, another 6 weeks. I was able to go back to work finally, but only after I had the emergency surgery to remove my fallopian tubes. And then we had the conversation about having a full hysterectomy because they could not figure out why the infection had attacked my fallopian tubes. But they could tell that it was in the fallopian tubes and they were afraid that it was going to impact the rest of my reproductive organs. So they wanted me to just go ahead and have a full hysterectomy. Was I okay with that? Did I plan on having any more children? No. My kids are grown. I don't want no more kids. I've been trying to get a hysterectomy for years. They wouldn't do it because of my age. So I was all for it. I was all for it. And that's what I did. I ended up having, later on after returning to work, going back out for a few weeks after having a full hysterectomy. And that's how stress has, the stress of being a caregiver has impacted my life on a physical. And now I'm at a point in my life where it's beginning to impact me again on a physical level, and I'm refusing to let that happen. This is called the caregiver's crash because I feel myself crashing and burning even now. So I've started therapy sessions, I've started coaching sessions, and I'm concentrating again on things that make me feel good, things that make me feel better, because what I want essentially is to be whole and healthy again. So the question is, am I okay? No, but I'm working towards it. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you, hopefully, next season with the next set of probably 8 to 10 episodes where I focus more on my husband's health overall and how that impacts us, my father's health overall and how that impacts us. We're going to be talking about that more in detail. hopefully over the next 8 to 10 episodes. I appreciate your time. I thank you so much for spending it with me, and I hope that anything that I have said has let you know that you're not alone. I will also provide for you telephone numbers where you can get help, whether it be for mental health, and none of these things are sponsored. No one is paying me to do this. But I want you to have the information. So that will be included in the description of this podcast. Peace and blessings. Remember to walk in your purpose and know that I appreciate you.